Steve from GuitarNiche here. Well, on the bench today we have a 2021 Vintera Fender Stratocaster made in Mexico. To give you a little idea of what we're dealing with here as far as specs and components before we get into the actual setup particulars. It has a Powfaro fretboard, a vintage radius neck, that's 7 1/4 inch radius, vintage style tremolo system, really cool pickups. I'm not quite sure what the specs are on them, but I will throw a picture up. They got the gray fiber bobbin and vintage tuners, of course, matching headstock, very, very nice. What I've done to this point to set the stage is I've replaced the synthetic nut with a bone nut. That's what the client wanted. It's all good, okay? And it's been dressed out to the point where it's just ready for its final cuts and improvements, let's say, to get it into the happy place, you might say. So it's no different at this point than a production instrument. Down here, things are as they were. I leveled the frets so that I knew that there wouldn't be any issues as far as high frets, low frets, stuff like that. In fact, the owner said that he's using a rocker. He found some problematic areas, so I said, "Yep, no problem." I went and took care of that. During the course of setting this up, we will clean the fretboard. We will set the pickup height. We will adjust the radius. We will intonate it. At this point, I have checked the electronics, getting under the pick guard to have a look to make sure there's no monkey business going on in there, because sometimes people, they borrow stuff and they do some shady stuff. We don't want to see that. Under the jack here, I took a look at that. It's not a switchcraft jack, but it's okay. It's just one of these things. Okay, pots are good though. Switch is good. All that kind of good stuff. What I'm interested in finding out is how these pickups, this is for later reference, are going to react once I adjust them, because as it sits now, the pickups are dumped on the bass side. Now, whether that is because it's a magnetic issue, which is why you would do that to begin with, and we'll find out about that later when we get to that point. The assessment otherwise is there's some work to be done. Okay, the neck's not too bad. I had to straighten it out to do the leveling, and then of course you put the strings back on and it's under compression again, and it's been sitting for a day. Just want to make sure that everything is copacetic. Doesn't feel too bad, but I do want to make an adjustment here, and it has the vintage style end of the neck truss rod adjuster, so we'll have a quick look at that and go through those motions, as it were. And one last thing before I go, I will mention that being that this is a vintage style 7 1/4 inch radius, we have to deal with fretting out. Okay, so I have not adjusted the saddles here at all. This is the way it came in. But after I straightened out the neck and did a very light leveling to make sure everybody was in line with the neighbors and stuff, this will be a challenge to see how comfortable we can make it with a 7 1/4 inch radius, because that roundness in the fretboard going this way, okay, is a cylinder, and when you try to bend a string into a hard cylinder like that, you're literally pushing the string into the top of a crown, or into an interfering mass, you might say. Okay, it's physical limitations. Beauty. Okay, so these are the old strings. We're going to get rid of those, and etc., etc. Anyway, we will carry on. Thanks a lot. First thing we're going to do is adjust the fretboard, or the relief in the neck, so that it's as straight as I can get it and feel comfortable with it. I can always back it off if I have issues, but when it comes to setting up an instrument, considering where this is going to wind up and where this is going to wind up, Always start with a straight neck and then introduce relief as is necessary. The straighter the neck is, the more comfortable it will be. Simple as that. The trick will be this. I'm also going to keep the old strings on there for as long as I can to do the basic adjustments, because trying to do all the, you know, the hardcore relaxing the strings, tightening the strings up and stuff like that with brand new strings, you're going to kill them. You're going to lose all the life they well, they're going to degrade before their time, and that's no fun. So when it comes time to restring it, we'll get to that anyway, and we should have a full lifespan of good stringness. Okay, so we're just gonna crack the bolts in the back here. Okay, the instrument has basically no pressure on it, and loosen off these bolts. This neck being a vintage style, it has the vintage style truss rod adjuster. So I'm just going to organize these bolts using my favorite trick, just a simple rubber band, okay? And hold that together as I turn it over. Okay, gently take that out. And so what we're going to do is we're going to adjust that adjuster at the end. Okay. Now, when you're adjusting a vintage style adjuster, use a flat blade. Never the don't use a Phillips. Okay. There's not enough surface area there to do the job correctly. So we're going to give that a little bit of a crank. Just a teeny little bit. A little goes a long way with these instruments, typically. And I'll reiterate that this was adjusted, and I worked on this yesterday to do the fretwork and preliminary stuff. And it had been sitting for a full 24 hours, and it moved a little bit, but not too bad, not too bad at all. Okay. Now I will crank one. Crank the other. Now I know that that's held in place. And bring that up to tension. I'm going to leave these out for the time being. This neck will be just fine as is. No need to stress the bolt holes and stuff by tightening everything down, and then you're gonna have to maybe undo it, and it's just wear and tear on the bolt holes. So two will stabilize it for sure, no problem. How do we look with our relief? I can tell you right now, that's a pretty frickin' flat neck. I would say, just by eyeballing that is somewhere around 4 to 5 thou, which is pretty darn straight, okay? Which is wonderful, because if I can get it to work with a really straight neck like that, I'll be a happy camper. I'm probably going to have to introduce a little bit of relief to make everything happy. But to carry on here, the next step is I'm going to cut the nut in the condition it's in right now. And during this process, it's very normal to go back and forth between, one part and another part, etc., to, get everything to where it needs to be to have everything working as it should. Okay. One thing I'm going to address right from the get-go is, let's do this. That's fretting out. So I'm going to, let's see, this will be interesting. Is it millimeter? No, it's imperial, which is wonderful. I'm going to see where the string height is going to wind up. All right, okay, I had to get the specs because all it takes is one snap string to hit you the wrong way, and protective eyewear is a wonderful thing. Now, while I'm here, what I'm looking at is making sure the strings and the saddles are centered across the middle, so the strings are in the middle of each saddle. I'm also going to make sure that the strings are going up the center of the fretboard. That is, there's not too much reveal on the bass side or the treble side. If anything, we want more purchase on the treble side so that we can bend mightily. There we go. That's all it takes. It's just a little pull, and we might want to double check that later. That's good. That's good. It's not gonna, if it moves a little bit, it's not gonna be a big deal. So I raised that first string just a hair, and it wasn't enough. So I'm gonna raise it again. Now, how much is it going to need? It's going to depend on whatever it requires. Oh, and it breaks. Craptacular. So, is that going to be enough? Let's find out. Almost. Give that a little bit more of a tweak. Okay. And I want to make sure that the actual saddle is nice and level this way. So I can look at it from the end on, and I see that the one side is a tad low. And because it's fretting out, I'm just going to raise that just a hair. Good. It's just on the verge. Just on the verge of fretting out. And it's not too bad. Action is not too bad, but we're going to use that as a baseline to set the rest of the radius. So I have my homemade cardboard radius gauge here, which I really like using this simply because you can't hurt the instrument in any way with this, right? Whereas this being metal, yeah, you got to be a little bit more careful, of course, right? Anywho, so I know I'm in the ballpark with the treble side, and the bass side, I'm looking at it, just eyeballing it, it looks just peachy. Looks like it's like where I'd be comfortable with it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to just get the rest of these in the ballpark. Okay, so point to make here is I'm not going to say that this is the final adjustment. This is just getting things in the ballpark. The fine tuning is at the very end when we got fresh strings on it, and they have you know, the initial stretch is done, and everything is pretty much as it will live, you might say. Now you might say, well, why are you using an under the saddle radius gauge on top of the strings? Well, that's a good question. I'll answer it like this. It is my preference to adjust the radius from the top of the strings because it will feel more, it really comes down to this. It feels more realistic in context of the radius of the neck. There are a few thousands of differences string to string because of the gauge. It's not like the thin string to the first string to the sixth string is equal dimensions from string to string in terms like you're adding, I don't know, 15 or what, 5,000 each string, whatever the measurement would be. It doesn't work like that. It's not a straight line. If you do it from under the saddle, the G string, of course, will fall in line, but you will have an excited string that's a little bit too tight to the fretboard. Another way to say this is that by doing it from the top, the strings that are problematic tend to have a little bit more air to vibrate. So, you know, there's a double benefit there. It feels better, and the strings actually physically live on the instrument a little bit more comfortably, you might say. That's good. Okay, it's not perfect, but we're in the ballpark. Again, this is part of what we're trying to do. I will keep tuning, you know, whenever it's appropriate, to keep the pressure, the compression, and the tension on the neck within a range. Anyway, the next thing is I'm going to address the nut. Now that I've got the neck nice and straight, it might live there. I might put some relief into it, but I'm pretty happy with where it is. Now, before I continue, I'll say this. I had the owner sit down and play it in front of me so I could watch his body language and see how he, you know, approaches playing the instrument, and that gives me an idea of how to set it up to match his style as appropriately as I can, right? Now, I do have other videos on how to do this, how to cut the nut precisely, and my methodology here is I use light and the gap between the top of the fret and the string I'm cutting, or the slot I'm cutting, I should say, in the relevant string, and I look for a certain gap depending on the string and a few other things. It takes time. Yes, it takes time to develop, and the way you get there, if you want to do it absolutely safe, use the, you know, the third fret method, fine, it's all good, okay? But I like to get really down into the weeds where, you know, we're not just, you know, okay, we're in spec. No, I want to get real tight. I want to get real tight so that the instrument is like pushing that 10 out of 10 value. And this is how it's done. The only way you're going to get there is by making mistakes. So it takes time, it takes a few attempts, and once you figure it out, it's a beautiful thing. Anyway, just to double check, I've got a fairly flat fretboard. As I look at this, I'll explain this as quickly and as succinctly as I possibly can. The E string is fairly lively. The low E is fairly lively. And you want to give it a little bit more air, more room to breathe, to do what it does. Even just by, pluck the string, and you can see how it's greatly agitated, you know, moving a lot. And then Do the same with the first string. They are very different animals, so how you cut the nut should go appropriately, and each string in turn has its own sort of identity in terms of how it works on the guitar. So the orbit, or the wave that the first string makes, is tight. The wave that the sixth string makes is large. It's wider. It's more aggressive in terms of, you know, it's getting out there on the instrument. I have my nut slot files here. I don't normally do this, but I want you guys to feel comfortable that, you know, I do exercise some caution. Anybody who has cut a Fender or a, you know, Telly or Strat style nut before will tell you that the back wall on the fretboard behind the nut is not a fun place. You'll see a lot of instruments with notches and gouges and stuff like that, cut marks. So we want to, you know, minimize the potential for that. But I typically don't do this just because, you know, you exercise some care, and you, with a little experience, and you kind of figure it out. Okay, so that's not too bad. How can I express this? I would say it's roughly the same diameter as the string itself. So the gap of light in this instance is what I perceive as the same thickness of the string itself. This is a little bit odd set of strings in that this is what's going on there, okay? It's going 10, 13, 17, 28, 38, 48. And I have a nice collection of nut slot files which I'm going to use to accommodate these different gauges. This is a 38 file for a 38 string, but I'm not just gonna have at it straight. I gotta, you know, I'm gonna creep it in there to widen that slot wall just a little bit, because if it's too tight, that string is gonna bind in the slot. It's gotta have a little bit of room to move. And I will, hopefully I will remember to give that a little bit of lube when it's all said and done. Now you notice I pushed down on that. That is to help accommodate the ramping that occurs as the string passes from one plane to the next. So we have a plane like this breaking over the nut. What tends to happen is the string wants to round over, so I push it in and seat it so that I know what I'm seeing is as accurate as I can get it. The other thing you can do is just straighten out the string, and you'll really see, without a doubt, you'll really see what the break angle over the nut, or what what the true cut is. Now this is a 32. This should do just fine. Yeah, for what is supposed to be our 28. So I won't rock that too much. As I said, this is a bone nut that I replaced the synthetic one with. Very, very little work to do on that one. That's good. Okay. So as I get into the other strings, sometimes I push the string down, sometimes I just pull the string up to straighten it out, just as long as I'm comfortable with what I'm seeing. Now this third string, so anyway, fourth string's done, third string's a 16, 17, and that's within a few thou. I'm using a 20 thou file on that. And I'm going to get right close to that. I'm going to leave a little bit of air. You learn, as I said, you learn from experience. And what I learned was you can get really aggressive with your cuts and get the strings like right tight to the board and stuff like that. But it's you get too tight, you got problems with buzzing and stuff like that. And at this point, I'm not going to say that this is the absolute last cut. Once I put the new strings on and the instrument is say resettled and closer to where it's going to live finally, then I'll reassess things and I'll make some last, the actual final adjustments and give it a lube. So this is a 16 thou blade or file for a 13 thou string, which is just dandy. I'm gonna get that like so. That's pretty good. Now, before I get on to the last string, I'll make one point here. The third string, as I'm looking at the gap of light under the third string across the top of the first fret, my reference point is very similar to the low E. So what that translates to in actual thousandths, I have some records of it, but I'm not a numbers guy like that. I do have it's written in, or it's referred to in my Ultimate Guide to Guitar Action. There's some, factory specs and stuff, and my own measurements and stuff like that. But they're not absolutes. Here's the thing. I want to stress this. Whatever measurements I get on this instrument might not be exactly the same as the next instrument, even though it might be exactly the same model off the line, because of pressure and idiosyncrasies to the instruments and stuff. It's live and learn. Anyway, end of rant. Okay, first string down to the wood. Now, this is a 13 thou blade. Just getting me down to where I want to get to. Now I'm going to change up to 10 thou. This is the actual remnant of the file that one of my employees was kind enough to shatter on me. Got too aggressive one day. Now that's close. That might live there. That's good. So I'm going to leave that on there for now. So we have the nut is in the ballpark, very, very close, almost done. The radius down here is in the ballpark, very close, almost done. How's it all going to work now? And keep in mind that I'm still only using 2 bolts. I can guarantee with about 99% accuracy that by tightening up those last 2 bolts, it will not affect the overall setup. Beauty. The point to make here is, how do you teach feel? Very interesting subject, because at this point I have not, other than expressing what the actual dimensions are of my nut slot files, I have not gone and measured anything specifically about the string height itself, other than trying to accommodate the 7 1/4 inch radius on the fretboard. Either it works or it doesn't. I will give you at some point later in the video, I'll give you a ballpark way to use simple measurements to get your feet on the ground. But either it feels right or it doesn't. It should not feel mushy in the middle. It shouldn't feel buzzy or sound buzzy. Everything should work as it should. I'm going to adjust these pivot screws, fulcrum screws, whatever way you want to call them. The other thing is, we're going to clean the fretboard while we're here. First, I'm going to take a spring out. Why? I want to not force these screws, mangle the heads, that sort of thing, and just reduce the tension a little bit. And this is how I'll go about it. You see that little bit of turn? If you're watching, let's see if we can get that a little tighter. Okay, if I back that out, okay, I tighten the screw. You see that move? Okay, so that's my point of contact right there, and then I'm going to just back that off about a quarter turn, and then I'll go to the next one. Same process. Find the point of contact, back it off a quarter turn. Easy peasy. You can do it with the bar too, you know, just put the bar in, let it sit, and watch it react as you turn the screws. You can also do this with the strings on, but of course you're going to be working around the strings and you're going to mark them up. Okay, so that one was a little tight to begin with, the 6th string. So there's that. I'll just go back and double check. Great. Sometimes these screws can be, depending on how, you know, the model, etc., where they were made, quality controls issues and stuff like that, they can be all over the map. But this is the process to make sure that they all are just flush to the top plate, the bridge plate, and we still have full range of motion there. Okay, so now I'm going to, where to go? There we go. I'm going to pop that spring back in. Show you another trick. This is my preferred method. This is just a El Canadiano style. I think it's number 1 Robertson, if I remember. It's either a 1 or 4 or something like that. Anyway, it's a small Robertson 4-corner head, which works like a champ. See, it grabs, there's a lip there that grabs the loop end of the spring and gets it over the claw. Peachy keen. Now, what I did notice is that there's a little bit too much tension on that plate right now. So while I'm here, I'm just going to back that off a little bit. Might have to reset that when I get the strings back on, because of course the pressure will change. But I got to tell you, this is sitting beautifully flush to the back wall of the route here. In other words, the wall right there. I mean, you can barely see any gap there, and the bridge is nice and flush on the body. In other words, the bridge isn't tipped up here. There's no extra air underneath the forward edge. It's nice and flush to the body. Nice, you know, it looks very, very good. So the machining and the tolerances are very, very good here. When I'm adjusting these screws, the claw plate screws, tensioners, I just want to make sure that the back edge of the claw plate here is in line with the route, or the face of the route here. And at the moment it looks like it's just shy of ½ an inch, maybe, what would that be, the 7/16 or so. Most genuine Strat style instruments will wind up with this kind of setup, which is a semi-floating, semi-hardtail, with a 3/8 to, you know, in the 3/8 ballpark, more or less, depending on your string gauge and your other preferences. Now, cleaning the fretboard. All right, fun stuff. The wonderful thing about modern finishes is that they are wonderfully resilient. That is, if this was nitro, I wouldn't do it the same way. I wouldn't go about cleaning it, the fretboard that is, the same way. Because nitro, you have to be very, very careful with it. Still, I want to exercise some best practices here and protect what we do have in place. So that's all masked off. This is low tack painter's tape. Last thing you want to see is using a high tack tape on a vintage instrument and watching all that lovely paint come off, chips and stuff like that. It's not fun. So what am I going to use to clean the fretboard? I think I'll use a mild detergent. I'll spray that on, rub it in real fast, and wipe it off real fast. Okay, so a little bit of junk on there, not too bad, not too bad. It's fairly clean, because I did clean it after I did the fret work, but I want to make sure that it's in very, very nice condition. And any contaminants, bye, see ya in the garbage. And I'll go for a new paper towel. You can use if you want to be really safe about this sort of thing, put a couple drops of dish soap in some warm water, a bowl of warm water, and use some paper towels and scrub away. The water, the liquids that is the in the detergent, there's of course there's water, and what that does is it furs up the wood, and if you get at it quickly, you can give the fretboard a nice clean and polish the frets at the same time. Beautiful. Okay, see that? That's actually more fret material than anything, because paper towels do have a very, very mild abrasive quality, but they're not. It's not so bad that it will harm the finish. And these frets, they're very, very nice, very nice, nice and bright and shiny, shiny and briny, as I've said before. Okay, well. As things go, today's product is Dr. Duck's. Am I a huge fan? Nah, it's okay. It's all right. I just feel like it's a good match for this board, because Pau Ferro is this is a pretty tight wood. It's somewhere in between like a rosewood and ebony. It's dry by nature, at least this particular example is, and it's kind of tight like ebony would be, whereas rosewood is oily, and ebony of course is quite oily too. But anyway, it's more of an intuitive decision at this point. Couple drops, and pop that on there, rub it. They say you can use this stuff, that is Dr. Duck's, on all parts of the instrument and stuff like that. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it leaves, oopsie, wow, that was okay, gusher. I think it leaves a little bit too much, yeah, I'm gonna trash that, okay. It leaves a little bit too much residue, even if you do, you just use a couple little drops, like I didn't. And use the right product for the right job, you might say. So as a conditioner, fretboard conditioner, it's fine. It's fine. And I've used it on other instruments with different finishes and different applications. I go, no, not a fan, not a fan. Anyway, that's experience. Now, by way of comparison. Well, this and this, recognize that, F1 oil. It's great, it's wonderful, but it's not for every instrument, in my opinion. Okay, it does a great job. Old English does a great job, but it's not for every instrument. Wyman's, okay, great product. The beauty of this is that it's thin. So dry necks and stuff like that, or certain applications, as I've said in the past, this is my favorite. Yeah, and there's maybe one or two other products. Of course, got the lighter fluid, all that kind of good stuff. And at this point, that fretboard is nice and clean. I will say this. This particular instrument is kind of an anomaly. I'm impressed with some things and really not impressed with others. And one I'll point out is the dots here. Hopefully you can see that. The dots on the neck are off. It's not in the center of the fret space. Neither is this, neither is this, neither is that. They're all off by fractions, which is kind of bizarro. I can't account for it. It's machining issue, quality control, nasty Fender. The other thing is there's some overspray at the top here from the lacquering process, clear coating the top of the face and stuff, and there's some overspray that got under the tape. And I tried to scrape it out, but it's just not coming out. It penetrated into the wood, and I'd have to excavate, far too much wood to make that go away. For whatever reason, there was an extra long screw on that tree. I mean, it was like, geez, 5/8, crazy long. And the seagull here, the vintage style string tree, was chattering and sloppy, and anyway, I wound up replacing it. What else was there? Something else that was under my skin, so to speak. Just little anomalies. Anyway, but at the end of the day, some of this is more cosmetic than anything, and otherwise it's just dandy. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'll get the strings installed, and we'll finish up the rest of the process. Okay. So it's the next day. The fresh strings are on, new strings, and the instrument has sat under compression for a day or so. I have the luxury of doing so. You may or may not. It's not absolutely necessary, but in general, you're going to get, if you do have to make any truss rod adjustments, you're typically going to get 95+% of the full monty. So it's best to give it some time, especially if it's a big adjustment. Simple as that. So we're gonna have a quick look at our relief here, which looks pretty good. How does it feel? This is a key thing. And what I'm finding is I am chasing this truss rod. So what I think is going on is there's a little bit of compression happening at the adjuster. So I'm going to take the neck off again and give the adjuster another little crank, because it looks to me like there's a little bit too much air, or it has actually dropped a little bit. So this is the kind of thing you see with multiple instruments over time. This is the benefit of experience. We're going to try to ultimately control the final result, which is as good as the instrument will allow, if I can put it that way. Anyway, I'm going to take the neck off again. This is why I only do a couple bolts at a time. so that on contingency, if I do have to take the neck off again, I don't have to deal with all of the bolts, and it saves wear and tear on the overall system, the bolt system you might say. Okay, carefully flip that over again. By the way, I did give the strings an initial light stretch, so relaxing them and taking the neck off, it's not going to compromise things too much. I'm pretty comfortable with that. And I'll give this a little bit of a turn. So what I'm feeling there is the amount of binding going on, or pressure going on at the adjuster end there. You never want to go full gorilla on a truss rod ever. In reality, a truss rod should only be there for contingency. The load should be taken entirely by a good strong neck. But you know, it's better to have it than not. Okay, the chuck on that drill is on the lightest setting, and these screws would never have an issue of stripping or buggering them up. Once again, I'll give that a quick alignment. Just making some assessments about reining all our components in to get the maximum functionality out of the instrument. So that is better. That's better. And we're looking at about, again, around about 4 or 5 thou relief at the moment, which is pretty flat. And it should feel nice. Again, it depends on the player. Somebody who's more aggressive, you want to introduce a little bit more air in there. And that, of course, will go along with the saddle height and so many other factors, string height, etc. So, since things are very close to being dialed in, I'm going to take another look at the nut and see if we can call this one a done deal. Now, once again, I do have a separate video, couple, on cutting a nut. And pardon the glare while I go through this. I'm just making an assessment here. That's not looking too bad at all. Not too bad at all. I think I'm gonna leave that. I think I'm going to, no, actually, I'm gonna take off literally about 1/1000th on the high E because I can. And it's just that kind of a thing where I like to get the high E nice and tight. Nice and tight to the board. That's just dandy right there. So I'm gonna leave the tape on until the very last little bit, just because I'm gonna put some lube on there. And recently, as a matter of explanation, I've been working with this Music Nomad tune it every string change anyway, and just making an assessment of it. Seems to be working fairly well so far. Okay, now on to the bridge here, the bridge system. I'm going to fine tune the string heights. Make sure we're not choking out here. There are how can I say, there are hot spots around the guitar that you know, you develop a sense for. Has to do with the nature of string gauge, tension, physics, and what I found is that like the vast majority of guitars will have hot spots right away. There's telltale places. Third fret, fourth fret on the top string, middle strings around the seventh fret area, all through this middle. Bottom string around the fourth fret, fifth fret, more into the sixth string, and during you know, if you're doing bends and stuff like that, 15th fret is a very typical bendy part because, or area I should say, because we're guitar players, right? If you're going to bend, you're going to be in E or A, and you're going to bend the high E string at the 15th fret. Just goes without saying. So I got just a teeny little bit of choke on that, and just for the sake of making sure I don't have to revisit this, I am going to tighten that up, make sure it's level on both sides. Pardon me, I'll get this back out of the way. Hopefully it's not interfering too much. Okay, and I want to make sure that I'm not too far over to one side or the other, and that's going to do nicely right there. At this point, I'm fairly confident that I shouldn't have to take it off again, because I've had the instrument for a few days. I've adjusted the truss rod a couple times. If there's any remaining issues, they will take some time to manifest, and I always say to the owner once the job is done, if there's some if the instrument moves after the fact, not a problem, because all the dirty work really has been done, and anything that needs attention is really just a after the fact adjustment. There's no charge to that sort of thing. Okay, that's just good practice. Pretty much the same. In fact, it's exactly the same. And I'm going to give that about a half turn each on the grub screws and see how that winds up. That's beautiful. And the bass side is lovely. And we're going to bring up the remaining strings accordingly. Before I continue, I'll point out, I mentioned previously that wherever a string changes direction, you will have, instead of the string doing this, for instance, coming out of the bridge block and then on through to the neck, it's not doing this, it's doing this. It's rolling, it's in a curve. So you want to push down on those strings and seat them. Otherwise, these tools here, you're not going to get accurate measurements, as simple as that. I'm going to leave that, because that's just dandy. Perfectly in knot and tune. Awesome. Okay. Let's get back to where we should be. By way of, say, description, I dug a little bit deeper into the pickups, and they are enamel wire, enameled, like old school enamel type wire, with a vinyl lead on them, as opposed to true vintage, which would be more of a cloth wire and stuff. But and again, the fiber bobbins. Okay, another thing I like to do with the vintage style tuners is I'll seat the string in the post using a blade screwdriver, very carefully. We don't want to see anything slip and cause any kind of undue damage. Okay, so what that does is it just helps the string to seat through the multiple changes in angles as it's coming out of the center post. You can hear it changed, eh? Now that was quite a difference in pitches on some of those strings, you notice, because this comes back to the same point I was making previously, which is that when strings are changing direction, whether it's going around a post or anything like that, any kind of curvature in the string, which is going to be there if it's a fresh install, has to come out. It has to come out to maintain stable tuning. So that most of that normally you'd get it out through stretching and stuff, but these little things will help that process along. Simple as that. So the other thing is, with typical vintage style Strat assemblies at the headstock here, there is no G and D string tree, which came later, of course, in the 70s, I believe. But in order to maintain or give a reasonable amount of break angle over the nut, what I tend to do is add a little bit, a fractional amount of extra string, which translates to, you know, I'm typically going for like 2+ winds and then adding a little bit more string material to the G and D strings. I get into 3+ winds. And those extra winds, one underneath the next, forces the string down, providing a little bit more pressure over the nut. So that will help to keep things in terms of maximizing tone. So where are we at now? We know that the radius is good. We know that the nut is good. It is intonation time. Now the intonation process will rely on one thing in particular, which is, you know, the beginnings of the final setup phase, but also the strings need to be stretched out. This is down a semitone. I'm just getting it in the ballpark. I stretched them when I put them on. That was yesterday. And I stretched them again briefly today, and I stretched them again. So anyway, but at this point, we're into what, the third, maybe, well, I would call it the third genuine stretch. That should be just fine. Not a gorilla stretch. I'm not trying to pull them off the guitar. I'm pulling in such a way that I know the limitations of the strings, and the stretch is almost to the max, but not at death's door for the tension of the string. Anyway, before I get to the very last thing, which is going to be intonation, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing a little bit, I'm going to set this trem. Well, there's a little bit of wiggle in that, which means, oh, let's get, there we go. Okay, I'm going to just drive those claw screws in just a little bit, and there should be, I'll stand up to do this so I don't slip around or anything. There should be a sweet spot. And of course this depends on the string gauge and pressure and stuff like that. So now what does that do to? Okay, that is still not enough pressure in the back, but very close. And some systems can be stiffer than others. This is a typical 3-spring system. The owner installed them, you know, laterally like that. Not the trapezoid system that you see sometimes. The trapezoid system doesn't, I don't see any real benefit to it in terms of, you know, like major changes in pressure or operation. That is minimal. Go a little bit more, I think. The other thing is, by using a screwdriver like this, you know, the certain diameter shaft, it could be whatever kind of screwdriver. It's not sloppy. It's just the right diameter, but it saves it saves wear and tear on not having to deal with, you know, the bar itself. It's all for assessment, you know. There's no wear and tear on the threads, no wear and tear on the bar, etc., etc. It's just, I'm just setting some pressure points. Okay, so that seems to be very good. And another test for this is, can I bend? Just a slight drop there. Not too bad, not too bad. Some of that deflection is the neck itself, but I'm going to give that just a slight little torque, and that should be fine. Alrighty, okay. Coming to the end. The saddle height is ridiculously nice. The saddles themselves are not overly high, they're not overly low, they're not bottoming out, they're just the right height. There's no shimming in the neck, so everything is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. In the ballpark. So we're holding it tuned pretty good, and time for intonation. Now, I've done intonation videos before, and I'll link to one or two of them. I'll link to it. But rather than setting up specifically for that sort of thing, I'm going to explain what's going on here briefly, and we'll edit it. Okay. I'm going to use, let's see, the neck pickup. Now, the pickups are still where they were when they came in, which is kind of maybe a little further away than I'd like, but we'll get to that when the time comes. As long as I have a signal out for intonation, I'm good to go. Now, I'm going to start with a B note on the 5th string. Being that we're a semitone down, this will be the 3rd fret. And again, to reiterate, why am I not just using an open string? Well, I've got a limited tuner to begin with, and I like it that way. Simple is better. Simple is better. Anyway, I could use the 1st fret, and I will. You know, cross check with the 1st fret. But there's a liability being so close to the end of the neck, because we have to deal with the deflection. There's no way around it. You know, this is not a 0 fret. This is the end of the neck, and I want to be intonating using notes that are on the instrument, and then I'll temper them after the fact if I feel it's absolutely necessary. I might use whatever other method. So again, this is a B, and I'm going to use 12th, the equivalent of a 12th harmonic, using that note, and see where we wind up. Okay, just above. I'll explain what's going on, what I'm seeing. I want to get at least close to the 0 as I possibly can. And whether I'm high or low is irrelevant, as long as I'm in the ballpark. What really matters is getting the same result at the midway point for that whatever note it is. So that's actually splitting the 0. Now as I keep my hand on the guitar, here's a fun fact. During this process, the guitar is going to heat up. My registrations, the tuning on the guitar is going to change. My registration references are going to change. I have to keep coming back until the instrument reaches a nominal temperature where it's in it like a played condition. This is the good stuff that makes better end results. That is just a hair shy. So I'm going to use this. So in other words, it's flat. The upper fret is flat, meaning I gotta shorten the scale length. Come on, back up. Oops, wrong fret. So I'm going to try to explain this process using this one string. Okay, so there's my note, and perfect. So now I have exactly the same registration from this fret to this fret, an octave away on the fretboard. No interference from anything. And now I'm going to check my D. So I'm going to cross-reference. Keep in mind it's down a semitone. And once again, I got exactly the same visual cue from the meter. So the other thing I want to mention, and I'll stress this every time, use nominal pressure. Don't gorilla grip it. Don't, pussyfoot around the notes. Play them like you would actually play them, and don't be, hesitant to push the fret a little bit and watch what happens on the meter. And then you'll figure out just by pressure, you go, oh, well, that's kind of normal right there. And then take your readings that way, okay? So that worked out just dandy. And now I'm going to actually use the A itself because it's down a semitone and our first fret is going to be an A. And that is just on the high side, and that is within tolerance, I would say that. Okay, it's all good. Now, of course, I could use an E and an E as such, but the point is I will repeat this process for every string. And at the end of the day, I should have a nice staggered visual reference down here, which, by way of further explanation, if I don't have a 1, 2, 3 and a step back, 1, 2, 3, jump, 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 that sort of thing. If I don't see that the way it should be, that means there's an issue somewhere. Something needs attention. Maybe the nut, one of the slots isn't cut correctly. Maybe one of the strings is out of tolerance. See all these kinds of things on a regular basis. But anyway, I will carry on with the rest of the intonation process and be back in a moment. Now we're on to wrapping it up, which is our final points. Lubo. With this product, what we're gonna do is get a toothpick here. It comes with an applicator, but a toothpick will do just fine. Okay. And put a little bit on the end. First thing I'm gonna hit is the tree, the string tree. Let's put that on the string itself a little bit. Beauty. Very, 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 very small amounts. You don't need stuff going all over the place. A little bit under the string. I'm going to put a little bit down here on the saddles. And to work things in a little bit, I'm going to take my handy dandy screwdriver. And if you want to go like all nines, I mean, put a little bit of lube on the back edge of the bridge plate holes. But like anything, when you introduce something like that, you're also going to attract some dirt eventually, so it can look kind of ugly after the fact. Now where am I here? All right, we're all over the place. Okay, it seems to be staying fairly stable. Tuning. Tuners are okay, but they're vintage style, and they're the gear ratios a little bit goes a long way, sort of thing, right? So that's the extent of what the user really is going to probably use it for. A little bit of wiggle, that's it. Because we could get a little bit of... Well, it's holding a tune. I'm happy with that. Not in tune. Some of this activity is just the strings are, you know, coming together and settling in. Now, that's great. Intonation is good, all that good stuff. What about the pickups, you say? Okay, well... let's find out what the pickups are actually up to. So, I would just add, you know, eyeballing what I see here, holding the strings down close to the body like this. The pull pieces on the outer sides, because these are staggered, so I'm just using the outer pull pieces as reference points. They are on average about 1/8 of an inch away from the strings. Yeah, pretty much. Now, what's gonna happen if I bring up the bass side of the neck pickup? How is that going to affect what's going on further up the neck? Lovely. That's a lovely knot sound. This is one of the idiosyncrasies of vintage style pickups and, you know, intense magnetic fields. Warbling. This has to do a lot with the gauge of the string and the strength of the magnet, as I said, and all sorts of wonderful things. A lot of technology there. I'm not a pickup guru, but I know when something sounds bad, I can tell, and that's bad. So there's a reason why the bass side is dumped in, and we're going to see if we can't level that out a little bit. So I'm gonna, once again, I'm going to moderate the bass side, that is, get it further into the body, and I'm going to see if I can creep the treble side up. Let's see where, if there's any limit to that. A little bit of warbling. Ooh, nice overtones though. A little harmonic content. A little bit of warbling though. Yep, a little bit of warbling. So I will back that off a hair. So it's something like again, back to where it was, more like 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to add a little bit more air on the bass side, dump it in a little bit more. It shouldn't affect the output too much, With humbuckers and stuff like that, you can get the pickups right tight to the strings, and the output will go along accordingly. Right tight to the strings will give you like a really nice aggressive output, but it can dirty up too. So never be shy about playing with your pickup height, because you can really finesse your output, and hence how your signal chain works as a whole by doing that. Better. Still choking out a little bit, and I think that has a lot to do with the other pickups, because they are a little bit tighter. So I used the neck pickup to kind of give me a general sense of how much is enough. Okay, so now as I hold the strings down here, each pickup is, the amount of air underneath the strings is basically the same across the board. That's clean. A little bit of sizzle there, but that's shouldn't be a problem. Anyway, so one final. Good. Everything seems to be just peachy. Okay. Seems to be working. That's nice and thin. Anyway, should I go through each and every fret and bend it? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. You know, the real test is play it. Play the stupid thing and see if it's working properly, and then deal with it if you find an issue. Yeah, it seems to be working just fine. And what about our tones? See, there's a nice mod. That's factory. A tone control attached to the bridge pickup. I call that a wonderful thing. And the controls themselves, one thing I would mention is that the volume sweep on this, it rolls off quite quick, and the high content, it gets a little muted, you might say. So by way of making that, say, better for an end user, should you want to go that way, of course it's going to be dependent on your signal chain, things like that, and your amp, I should say, how much you want to regain of that higher end content as you roll the volume control down. You can put a filter in. You know, there's a bunch of good ones out there. And let's see if we can get squonky on this. Anyway, I'm not gonna bore you too much with some hacking here, so we'll call it a day. But this is This is a nice Vintera Strat, 60s modified, as it were. Turned out just dandy, and I'll play it for a little bit more and make sure it's all copacetic to put a term to it. To summarize, you know, we did the nut, we did the string installation, we did the pickups, we did the 7 1/4 inch radius, we set the action, we checked the electronics and the operation and all that good stuff. Everything is doing what it's supposed to do. It has some anomalies and stuff, but it's all good. Some final specs on our 2021 Fender Vintera modified 60s Stratocaster made in Mexico, which turned out just dandy. The relief at around the 7th, 8th fret area measured 5 thou, and as far as action goes, string height, we can say works like so. Here's an American nickel, which measures 0.077 inches, which is 1.95 millimeters, or basically 5/64, and that sits under the 6th string with a tiny little bit of room to spare. Okay, so that is going to be more like maybe 0.75 inches thou, that is. And then American quarter here, which measures 0.069 inches or 1.75 millimeter, or close, very close to 4/64, if you would. And that is a pretty fair fit under the 1st string with little to no play. If anything, it might be a tad thick. Okay, so that's where we wound up. So I think it's a done deal. We'll let it sit for another day and ship it. Anyway, my name is Steve. This is GuitarNiche. Thank you very much for coming out and watching. As always, play loud, have fun, have a great day. Read the description below for some free resources and stuff like that. Like and subscribe. Carry on. Cheers. See ya.